Morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Robert Parker, and I'm the chair of the board. Welcome to all members in attendance today, also to officers attending both here in the council chamber and on Microsoft Teams. The video feed of this meeting, as usual, is being broadcast via the County Council's website, and I'd like to welcome members of the press and public who may be watching our meeting online today. I'd also like to welcome following executive councillors and executive support councillors who may be attending our meeting. We expect Councillor Martin Hill, the leader of the council, to be joining us, and the same for Councillor Mark Whittington, executive support councillor for resources, communications and commissioning, and also Councillor Hilton Spratt, executive support councillor for people management, legal and corporate services. I'd also like to welcome members of the corporate leadership team. Debbie Barnes, the Chief Executive, is with us at the moment and will be leaving the meeting shortly. And James Drury, Executive Director for Commercial, will be in the council chamber but is unfortunately at the moment having traffic problems. I'd like to begin the meeting as usual with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned for this morning, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception area and then go into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park for further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles and devices are on silent? Also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure that you switch on your microphone? Otherwise, those attending the meeting via Teams and members of the press and public listening to our meeting online won't be able to hear you. Please also be aware that you need to speak directly into the microphone to be heard. However, they are very sensitive and could pick up any nearby noise or asides when switched on. If you want to ask a question, then follow the usual procedure. Can you raise your hand, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Tom Smith, will make a note and of those who wish to speak. Okay, that's the beginning. If we move to the items on the agenda, item 1 is apologies for absence and replacement members. Emily, do we have any apologies or replacement members?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Megan Machin, the Parent Governor representative, and we have Councillor Hall in attendance as a replacement for the Conservative vacancy. If we could also just note that Councillor Bootroyd and Andrew Crookham have also sent their apologies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have an apology of a different kind. Unfortunately, I've got to leave at 12 o'clock.
Okay, that's understood. Thank you for that. If we move now to item 2, declarations of councillors' interest, members of the OSMB are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared already on their declaration of pecuniary interest forms. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No? Thank you. Can we move now to the minutes of the meeting, the last meeting of the OSMB, Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, the 25th of November. What we need to do is to confirm and sign. I need to sign the minutes from the meeting of the board on the 25th of November as a correct record. First of all, do I have a proposer and a seconder on the minutes? Proposer? Thank you. Councillor Kendrick. And a seconder? Thank you. We will now vote on the minutes, but before we do that, I'd like to just go through, as I usually do, the papers so that we get the opportunity to remind ourselves of items that were on the agenda and whether the information that's recorded here we think is correct. So starting with page 7, any comments? Page 8, any comments? Page 9, any comments? Page 10, any comments? Page 11. Yep, thank you.
Hi, sorry to trouble everybody.
Not at all, not at all.
Think,
which page are you referring to, Alex?
Well, I think I did contribute to the meeting, and just can't really see that anywhere. I could be wrong.
Yes, I can remember you making I can remember you making a contribution. Perhaps, Nigel, could you? It would be helpful, Alex, if you could point to where you think there is a...
Debbie's got...
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. Yes, I recall the conversation, and I think it was in relation to the safeguarding indicator for adults under the success framework.
What a fantastic memory you have. Yes. Yes, I don't know if I don't know if I should mention that. You know, I said something, and that was
The minutes.
I just couldn't see in there, because we were talking about the corporate plan, weren't we? And there was a big, and I know Hugo made some comments as well about that, you know, the business thing,
Yeah, I think
piece of software. So I just wondered if any of that was recorded anyway. I just couldn't see it anywhere.
well, clearly it isn't, but I think the point is that the notes of the meeting are not a verbatim report. They're a report of those items that were considered important in relation to the subject.
No, I understand that nothing I say is important. It's not. I just felt that maybe I should mention it because
Okay.
you know, minutes are a legal thing, aren't they? And it just occurred to me, and I just felt able to mention.
So you're
it.
happy for us to press on?
Of course, yeah. I don't
Okay,
hold the meeting
thank
up,
you.
Sorry.
If we move from page 11 to page 12 and then to page 13, any comments? Page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, page 20 and page 21. So we've already had a mover and a seconder. Can we have a vote, please, on these being a true record of our meeting on the 25th of November? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, Councillor Strengle. Okay, thank you. If we could then move on to item 4, announcements by the Chair, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. I'd just like to make some comments. I attended the last meeting of the Executive, as you would expect, on the 7th of December, and presented the comments from our Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on 3 things: the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring Reports, the Corporate Plan Success Framework, and the Infrastructure Funding Statement in relation to the Infrastructure Funding Statement. I also highlighted that we will be receiving an update on the action plan for the recommendations of the Developer Contribution Review, which is on our agenda today, to scrutinise the progress that's been made. One further point, in light of the new government guidelines and the current situation in relation to COVID-19, all officers attending for items on the agenda from items 7 to 9 are in attendance via Teams. So they're my contributions. The final one I think I'd just make is that on behalf of Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, I attended the funeral of Bob Adams earlier, as did Councillor Dilks, to represent our Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any Executive Councillor announcements from Councillor Martin Hill? Martin's not present, and he doesn't seem to be online at the moment, but okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here as his support.
Lovely, Mark. I was going to introduce you in a minute, but I was just giving Martin the opportunity in case he was here to say something. But if he's not, go on. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think the only thing I was going to say was that we were expecting the local government finance settlement on Monday of this week, the 13th. But I think in view of all the COVID sort of debates that took place at the start of the week, it's now we're now expecting a ministerial statement in the Commons this afternoon, after which the finance settlement will be issued. So I'm guessing that hopefully we'll receive notification of it today, and if not, certainly tomorrow. And then the officers will be working through it and working through the implications. So I don't know if Andrew's got anything further to add on that. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No, Andrew's not, excuse me, not present at the meeting well, the information you've given, thank you for sharing it with us all, and we'll all look forward, I'm sure, to the budget settlement. Okay. Are there any other Executive Council announcements? Councillor Hilton Spratt. Is Hilton online, do we know? No. Okay, so that's the Executive Council announcements. Thank you, Mark. Moving on to Chief Officer announcements. While we've got Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive, anything you would like to say, Debbie?
Nothing, thank you, Chair.
Okay. And online, Andrew Crookham is otherwise engaged, and James is en route to our meeting, so we can't get any pearls of wisdom from James at the moment. Moving on, item 5, consideration of call-ins. Emily, have we had any call-ins this month?
No, none received, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 6, consideration of councillor calls for action. Again, Emily, have we received any councillor calls for action?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Now move on to the substantive items on the agenda. Just one word, and the last meeting finished at 1:30, which I don't think everybody thought was ideal. Everybody has a right to speak, and everybody can take that up. But if we all take it up, then we end up with meetings that go on till 1:30 potentially. So I'm just making that point because it's not in everybody's interest that we have meetings that long, but at the same time we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. So it's about balance. I just make that point. Item 7 then, approval to award a contract for gas provision for Lincolnshire County Council's corporate property portfolio. Pre-decision scrutiny going to the Executive Councillor between the 17th and the 23rd of December. I'd like to welcome Andrew Howsham, Commercial and Procurement Manager, who's attending to present the report. Over to you, Andrew.
Morning, and thank you, Chairman. The report is to cover off the Council's contract for gas provision, which is due to expire in March 2023. The Council's been receiving its gas provision for its corporate property portfolio via the ESPO framework now since 2007. The intention is to continue with this along with over 100 other organisations, including a number of county councils, and sign up to the next agreement, which would take the council from April 23 to March 27, where the council is currently spending circa £450,000 per annum. A decision report, which is attached to Appendix 1, is included, setting out a clear recommendation, which includes the approval to award the contract to ESPO and to Total Energies Gas and Power, approve the council to be able to maintain the commodity buying strategy, which it currently already operates under, approves the council to continue to buy brown gas, but with this to be reviewed on an annual basis going forward, along with finally to delegate the decision-making powers to the Executive Director for Commercial in consultation with the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety and Procurement on an annual basis to determine which type of gas to buy going forward. The report sets out the reasoning for the recommendation. Lincolnshire County Council are able to influence ESPO's commodity trading on the basis of Lincolnshire County Council has representatives of the Energy Governance Panel, so it gives us a voice there to be able to influence that. ESPO's historical performance has served the councils well in the past, and more recently during what we've obviously in terms, I'm sure everybody's aware of the volatility of the market and current price hikes that we've recently seen. It meets the national procurement strategy in the fact that we are advised and recommended to utilise national framework agreements, particularly around obviously securing services, utility services. The commodity buying strategy that is recommended, which is the purchases in advance strategy, provides a level of budgetary certainty in what is most definitely a volatile and uninfluenceable market. In addition to that, going through the ESPO framework agreement, the council would receive a circa £16,000 rebate over the term of the contract. The report further provides background information detailing historical expenditure and consumption, as well as explaining the two buying strategies that we have considered. In terms of the reason why the report is here today is that I'd like to invite the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board to consider the report and determine whether the board supports a recommendation to the Executive Councillor as set out in the report, and or agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. Just a further point to note, Chairman, is that the Executive Councillor, Mrs Bradwell, has been kept informed in terms of the progress of this since the initial conversations and discussions took place at C&CB, and has a copy of the decision report as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Andrew. Who would like to speak? Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report. I'd just like to ask, well, a number of questions really, but related to the brown-green gas purchase. And first of all, I think I'd like to ask, it's more actually on the process of how we're going through it and how it relates, how these sort of decisions relate to the Green Master Plan that the Council's adopted, and which is welcomed. Is it compliant with the is this decision compliant with the Green Master Plan, and how has it been assessed against the Green Master Plan? I read the report, and I can see that through the ESPO, none of the clients are purchasing so-called green gas currently. And I can see that, but you know, is it not available, green gas? I think the report says it is, but it would cost more, of course. And so on that, with that in mind, I note that this contract will go from March 23 to March 27. You know, and there's an annual consideration of whether we should change to green gas. Will that come back annually to the OSMB for consideration? And you know, what is the sort of the point at which you know, it becomes viable to say, you know, what is the price differential in green and brown, where we might say, well, it's now time, or it's viable to switch to the green. I'll just ask those questions for information. Thank you.
Sorry, over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think to answer the question, I think the consideration of green and brown gas, as you quite rightfully stated, is that there is an annual consideration. The annual consideration, I guess the decision will be made based upon, I guess, the green gas's availability, but also in terms of, like, say, the balance. I guess the decision will be made as to whether it's the viability, I guess, is around comparing, I guess, what we've got within the green plan that you've just referred to, I guess, in addition to obviously kind of the financial viability as well. So I think they will be the two key elements that will be taken into consideration, and they will be reviewed on an annual basis. I think the reason why the clear recommendation at the moment is to maintain with the brown gas at the moment is because this is a very, very new, underdeveloped market. And I think that if, I know that through speaking to ESPO, that if all of ESPO's clients were looking to move across to green gas now, there simply isn't enough green gas being generated out there at the moment for them to be able to kind of meet the whole of ESPO's gas portfolio consumption. So you can see, even from that point there, that obviously that this is a well underdeveloped market, and the cost increase to the council, the figures are included within the report, but are actually kind of quite astronomical at the moment. So I think you're right in the fact that kind of the decision will need to kind of be made, and consideration will have to be given against the environmental impact, as well as obviously the financial implications on the council.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. May I just come back, Chairman?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It was also, and I hope, and I would ask that that decision does come back to this board on an annual basis to sort of at least review and look at to see at what point it may be viable to go to the green option. But I was also asking about the process with the Green Master Plan, and obviously we've got an environmental programme board being set up with the Green Master Plan, which again is welcomed. But has this decision, or should this decision actually go to that board for consideration? And how has this decision been reached in relation to the Green Master Plan?
Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you. To answer the question, it hasn't been, and I think the reason why it hasn't been at the moment is because what we're stating is that kind of at the moment the green gas supply at the moment isn't well established enough, I think, for anybody to kind of be considering it at the moment. I think in terms of security of supply, and obviously the consideration from a financial perspective, for me, it's certainly the consideration that we've kind of given to it already is the fact that A, it's not affordable, B, the market isn't developed at the moment, and it's something that kind of needs to be looked at more closely, probably, like say, within the next 12 months to review it on that annual basis and give that consideration to it. I mean, I think what we've set out within the decision-making report as well, Councillor, is that what we're trying to set out in here is that kind of that we won't have to keep coming back to Overview and Scrutiny Management Board every 12 months to get this decision signed off. The intention is to give delegated power to the Executive Director for Commercial to kind of make that decision in consultation with the Executive Councillor.
Thanks for that. Martin, could I bring you in? So, as not just leader of the council, but also responsibility for finance, because what we've just been talking about, and it's been elicited very clearly, is this is an economic decision and about affordability. Okay, and if we take a view that if we always go for economic viability, then we're always going to end up with the cheapest supply rather than one that satisfies our green credentials that we're trying to establish. So I just wondered if you've got any thoughts that you'd like to share with us about when you think it's likely that we will move towards this green gas rather than brown gas.
Well, not being an expert in these matters, but certainly the report, when I saw it, I thought it was pragmatic. It's probably premature at this stage to go to try and do something which I think has been explained is not achievable at the moment. So I think, I have sympathy with what Councillor Dilks is implying, that, there probably does need to be a review and how that's done. And I think when this will happen, but there is a balance, of course, between delivering on our net zero commitments or our reductions, carbon reductions by 2025, and the balance of actually what is actually sensible and pragmatic. So I don't know whether James can help, but I think this, to me, at this particular time, would seem to be the sensible way forward. But whether it just then is, I think you're right. I would agree with Councillor Dilks. There is a political element to say there will come a time when that decision becomes much more marginal, and I think it can only be right that that decision is put before a wider democratic forum. So I don't know whether you agree with that, James.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Yes, I do agree with that. I think it is a moving market, if you like, Councillor Dilks, and I think things will continue to develop and change, and it therefore seems appropriate, I think, to bring this back probably on an annual basis, and certainly for the next in 12 months' time, to bring that back when I think the market will have changed, we'll have more confidence, or not perhaps, but hopefully more confidence in the supply, and then we can make a balanced decision with some recommendations to members around the cost versus the green agenda. But as has already been said, I think at the moment the market isn't that mature yet, and I think it would bring risk if we did anything at this stage. So I think the solution that's been outlined in the report is the right one for now, but I totally understand the questioning around at what point does that balance start to shift. And I think it's quite difficult to predict that in exact terms, therefore maybe a 12-month review might seem appropriate, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I certainly endorse the report. I think it's a very well written report. I also wish to endorse the principle of a PIA, which is purchase in advance. As somebody who isn't connected to gas but relies on oil, purchasing in advance saves a considerable sum of money where oil is concerned, and gas is only, this is now, unfortunately, with the supply issues that James has outlined in previous meetings, is very much the same. So I think if we were to go to the other model, which is purchase within period, I think the cost implications to the council, you're playing a bit of Russian roulette, if you like, because yes, it may be cheaper some months, but other months it may be 10 times more expensive. So this will give you a certainty in terms of the cost implications to the council, which I think is invaluable, especially when there are other departmental pressures and other issues in contracts where we haven't got that certainty available to us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep, Councillor Dill.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back, if I may, and say thank you to the leader and for the comments on. You know, I'm not suggesting it is. You know, I'm not against the report. I support the report, and I accept that it is. It may well be premature now. I'm just trying, and I know we're at the early days of the Green Master Plan. I'm just sort of anxious that we, you know, that is put into, that we listen to that and that we go along, and I do welcome the 12-month review coming back here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, I've got a question that develops the theme of what we've been talking about. The first one relates to the change in price. We're already having to pay more than twice as much money. If we refer to page 29, we can see that the council's wholesale gas costs equate to £277,000. The current market price is much higher, and it's going up to £512,000 a year, and that over the 4-year period, as is set out further on, amounts to 2.5 million. The question really is, given that increase because of the issues that we're now facing, it's a question of whether or not we are interested in having a review if the price of green gas is something similar to it before the year's review actually takes place. So it's about Andrew saying essentially that is 1 year likely to be within the period when the money that we've got available to us it makes it affordable, because a year away seems a long time, relatively speaking, depending on the flexibility. At the moment, there's no price quoted for green gas. I wondered if you could say anything about green gas availability, likely cost, and when there will be a tipping point at which many authorities will be joining us in wanting to purchase green gas.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to the point that you've just kindly raised to me, the information that's set out on page 29, that the figure that you refer to, the 277,000, that's the wholesale cost, not the total cost. So what we've got beyond that is kind of is the other figures that you're referring to when you're talking about twice the price. So I think in addition to that, I think the information that we're talking to, I think there is something in the report that talks about the additional cost. So if you look, I think at the top of page 31 that it talks about if we were looking at the equivalent volume of green gas, would add an additional amount of 542,000 over the contract term.
When is that likely? I mean, what are your thoughts about the development?
Right. Okay. So in terms of the development, I mean, it is very difficult to be able to kind of give you any kind of forecast, and even having conversations with ESPO. This is, like I've already stated, an underdeveloped market, and I think it will rely upon obviously investment from energy providers, the same as we have done when we've seen on the electricity side of things, where we've seen the development of wind turbines and various other means for renewable energies. I think in this particular instance, it's like I say, it's very, very early to tell. If I was trying to kind of give you a real honest answer around this, I don't foresee anything happening within the next 12 months that would be that radical, is my honest view and opinion. But as I've previously stated before, I am not an energy expert. Obviously, my job role predominantly is a procurement manager.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any more comments? No? Okay. So if you go back to the recommendation, page 7, with to consider the attached report and determine whether the board supports the recommendations. The Executive Council agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. Emily's captured those, and they will be included in our report. So all those in favour of that proposal? Anyone against? That's clearly carried. Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to offer a brief apology to Councillor Wotton and to Councillor Hill in relation to the attendance at Bob Adams' funeral. I did mention that I attended in Phildoaks, but I should have mentioned Ray and Martin, so for that I apologise to both of you. Okay, so can we move on then to item 8? Okay, item 8 is on page 35, and it's Business World System Redesign Update. We've got Louise and Andrew to present this paper. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm also joined and supported here today by Jason Davenport, our expert payroll consultant working with us on the project, and also our project manager, Sadie Rossington. So I'm just going to provide an update on where we are with the Business World redesign project and a bit of a background and recap of the project and how we have got to this stage. So the redesign project was approved by the executive on the 17th of December in 2019, and it's to deliver a move to a standard version of the Business World system. And that's working in partnership with Hoople Limited to deliver the solution. There are some presentation slides to go with this. I'm not sure if they can be shared, Tracy, on the system, if that's okay. Are those up on screen now? It's just I can't see them on my screen.
Redesign project.
You can see them there. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Just can't see them on the team screen. Thank you. To carry on then. So we're working in partnership with Hoople Limited to deliver the Business World solution. And we made agreement to adopt 4 core principles with this project, and that's to deliver the basics, which is a stable and secure system, which will be easier to manage and certainly to upgrade in the future. Supporting staff to be the focus, so improving the end user experience, and to adopt standard practices to deliver business outcomes required, and that we will change to make this a success. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this? The previous implementation back in 2015 included some significant number of bespoke features of the system, which in turn has resulted in a number of manual and off-system processes. As a result of this, the complexity of the solution means it is more complicated to keep up to date with the required updates, in line with the Business World product owner, which is Unit 4. The solution is also not used consistently throughout the organisation, and in some cases, local processes are in place. We want to achieve a stable and secure platform which provides more opportunity for optimising business processes in the future. What do Hoople bring to this? They have a number of existing clients, including local governments, schools, leisure organisations, as well as private companies. And they have over 10 years experience in the world of HR, payroll, finance and sales. They also have a consultant base which have expertise and have performed a number of successful implementations of this solution. Next slide, please. So the approach taken and following a methodical, previously proven approach by Hoople, it's organised into 5 key stages: the mobilisation stage, the design stage, and the build stage, which have all been completed now, and then moving into the test stage, which we are currently in, which includes full system testing and those payroll tests, which we'll be covering later on in the presentation. And then moving on to implementation for planning of go live, and then the post implementation go live support. So the planning stage, detailed planning for each phase takes place before the start and includes collaboration from all 3 organisations involved, which is the Council, Hoople and Serco. And we look at 6 key deliverables here, and that's how the project is broken down, which is the solution, which is Business World itself, the transfer of data from our business to the Hoople solution, the technology that the solution sits on to ensure that everybody can access it as required, service delivery, including issue resolution and developments in the future, the business architecture, so how our processes and practices will be adapted to work with the new solution, and change management, so the hearts and minds of the organisation and the readiness to use the new solution before go live. And in respect of ownership, those last 2 pieces sit with the council's responsibility for delivering those. Next slide, please. The solution design and business impact. So we started off with 7 solution design documents that cover all units of the solution required, and that forms the basis of the council's requirements and the basis of the build. All of those documents were reviewed by service leads, initially through face-to-face meetings, and then as we moved to remote working through Teams. And any impacts identified, and that might have been to existing policy, process, access roles, or any reports. These have all been noted throughout those sessions, played back to the service areas ahead of sign-off of those documents before the build phase. And those impacts have then been fed into the change management piece, which has been worked through throughout the project to again ensure business readiness. In addition, forms, reports and alerts catalogues were also approved using the same approach. For data migration, which is the transfer of all of our data from the current existing Business World system securely and accurately to the Hoople system, a detailed data migration strategy was produced by Hoople and reviewed by all service leads, including the HR and finance data owners. 3 phases of data migration have already been completed and reviewed, and actions managed to ensure that each migration becomes quicker and more accurate before go live. Testing activity has also been used as a method of identifying any issues with that data to ensure that all of those issues are completed before we do the final data transfer activity. The technical design and remote access, so initially considered the design on how all staff and schools would access the system from offices or schools. Clearly, as things have changed and we've had to evolve to ensure that the requirement for increased remote working is there, which has had to be redesigned and approved by the board to ensure that resilience in our current and future working environment. Next slide, please. So the main system build, as I've already mentioned, was completed off the back of those service design documents that were signed off. The solution has been built in 3 cycles by Hoople, and any existing sort of build activity that comes about throughout the test phases will be worked upon, but all of the core build was completed in advance of that test phase. And then Hoople themselves carried out the early functional testing of all the components that they built before releasing to the business for the following test phases. Change management process I've already mentioned, so we've followed a stringent change management process to ensure that we assess and either approve or reject any change requests raised, with particular focus on our premise to adapt and adopt. And as you recall, I mentioned that we will change to make this a success. We've been put a lot of effort into that part of the process and really making sure that we're not doing anything bespoke with the system unless absolutely necessary. Now I'm going to introduce Jason Davenport, who's going to talk through where we are with the payroll testing phase. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Louisa. Good morning, everybody. Following the build phase of the programme, the parallel running exercise is established to fully test the policy and terms and conditions for each of the council's payrolls have been built correctly and are calculating as expected. It's deliberately tested against 3 consecutive months to establish if arrears and back pay calculations are also working correctly as you move through those periods of review. Testing to 3 runs allows the first parallel run to identify any challenges and supports the review of new processes. The second parallel run then allows the system and processes to test those new routines and to see that those new routines are working well. And the teams then become familiar with those new routines. And the third parallel run is then expected to be as clean as possible and assure of the build in readiness for service readiness and go live. In the current system, there are more than 20 manual workarounds and a lot of off-system work performed to manage absence and pensions as very complex areas. For this reason, the team are taking a very methodical and detailed approach to ensure the calculations being performed and the results delivered are both correct and also using best practice where possible. These areas are being fully tested, and where possible, the intention is to remove manual workarounds and ensure the data in the system is available and being used for the calculations to prevent manual error. No stone is being left unturned and a very detailed review is being undertaken. I'm very pleased to say that the results so far are very positive and the new build will improve the current situation. At this time, PPR1 has been successfully completed for each of the 4 council payrolls. That's the council itself, the schools, the fire retained workers and teachers top up. And that includes having fully reconciled the payroll with detailed results and known issues to review. With all subsequent testing, also a full review of each of the general ledgers produced from the test system to be able to post to the financial ledgers, also having produced test files for HMRC and other third parties, and also successfully testing the BACS files for each of the payrolls. PPR2 now is well underway for each of the 4 payrolls, and this is where we can test new routines for sickness, for example, to assure that the systems the system is being used in the correct way and will deliver the expected results.
Sorry to interrupt, excuse me, but could you tell us what PPR1 and PPR2 actually means?
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. So the PPR is the payroll parallel running, and we're doing 1 is the first test, 2 is the second test, and then 3rd is the final test against that. So 3 consecutive months, 1, 2, and 3. I hope that helps, Mr. Chair.
I was just going to come in there as well and say, so the payroll parallel run process is that reconciliation and comparison of the payroll between the results in the legacy system and the results in the new Hoople system. So those 3 iterations that Jason's just explained, 1, 2, and 3, are actually 3 different months of a previous payroll that was completed. So we'll have taken an extract from our existing system after a payroll was completed, and the results for that full month, all of the net pay results and all of the broken down payments and deductions. So we've already got that. Then we run it on the new system in the same way, pull out of those results out of the system and then do an exact comparison between the two to ensure that it's still calculating correctly and in the same way. Throughout that comparison, then we identify and can interrogate any differences to see why those differences exist. So is that something within the build that needs changing? Is that a difference in penny roundings, for example, because systems work things in slightly different ways? But understanding that for every difference, right down to the penny that we've looked at this, we understand why, make any changes needed, and have that assurance that the payroll is working correctly. And we do that over 3 consecutive months so that we're following through the full payroll cycle of processes, including those monthly end processes that we do. So the transmissions to the HMRC at the end of each month for all of the employees' earnings, apprenticeship levy and things like that. So all of it, including a BACS test, is completed during those payroll parallel runs.
Fine.
Okay.
Do you need to continue?
Should we hand over to Sadie now, Louisa, for the further
yes,
updates?
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, appreciate your support today. I know you've been unwell, so thank you for joining us. So Sadie is going to talk through the rest of the test phase now. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. And good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to talk you through the remaining slides, and in particular around test activity. So we set out from the very start there would be 4, in exception to the payroll parallel runs, 4 test phases. The first of those is the functional testing, which is conducted by Hoople, and Louise has already mentioned, where they check the individual component parts of the build. They then hand it over to LCC, and our system experts then conducted integrated systems test, and that took place between the 18th of January and 8th of March this year. It's key to note that there were no critical impacts left open at the end of that step, and as a result, IST was then signed off by all service leads. If we could just move on to the next slide, please. So the next key phase is the user acceptance testing. So this is where we then hand over the system over to the end users, and they can then check that the system works as they expected, but also then consider how any re-engineered processes work and how we can then look at training and guidance for the organisation. User acceptance testing has been broken down into 2 parts. So user acceptance testing 1 took place between May and August of this year and consisted of 1,600 test scripts and over 200 people involved. It is worth noting at that point that no one that we know of has conducted testing of that nature remotely, which did pose challenges in terms of communication, access and document sharing. We are currently in a UAT phase 2, which includes a number of elements, including schools. We have seen delays here because schools are currently still being affected by COVID-19 and are struggling to engage with us when they are experiencing staff shortages and potential closures. So we're moving that into the new year, and we'll be carrying on into January. The final test phase is known as regression, and ultimately it's a combination of all of the system changes, any defect resolution and our final data migration that Louisa referred to all comes together, and we carry out more checks to make sure that nothing in the system has regressed or taken a backward step, and it's all working as we expected. The plan is for us to be able to undertake that phase in April 2022, and it's expected to take 2 months. It is lighter touch than UAT, but does cover all areas of the application. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So change management has been a key area, and as Louisa mentioned, is a responsibility of LCC as an organisation. Communication and engagement has been going on through various board meetings and sessions. What we have done is held a change management seminar on the 6th of December, which was an opportunity to get together in person and for service leads to present key changes in their area. This isn't going to be a one-off session. There is a detailed action plan being produced, which is going to be shared with the team and service leads early next year. And then there'll be a number of follow-on sessions where we look to increase our confidence levels for organisational readiness for change. In terms of training and guidance, so although we are still in the test phase, we have put a lot of focus and effort on the training and guidance delivery. A training strategy has been produced and signed off by service leads, including a training needs analysis. So who needs training on what and how? All training and guidance required has been pulled together in a catalogue ready for production. We have started production of some of those materials, and the look and feel for both training and guidance has been shared within the team, and also using the Change Influencers Network to update on how usable they are, and their feedback is being introduced. Full training will be done over a period of 2 months, and although we're not ready now, we have started to put together a detailed plan of how many people need to be trained, how many sessions will need to be held, so we can understand how quickly we can get through that. And there will be some following go live, which will be mop up for anybody that we've missed. In some cases, training will be delivered as a combination of the business world training team, but also the service leads. So key areas of finance and HR will be dealt with collaboratively, and the training materials written together. Communication and engagement. So we've already started working on our Go Live minus 3 month plan, varying from seminars, emails, use of the sort of intranets or other technologies to make sure that we can make the transition as easy as possible. Go Live floor walking would be the standard for any implementation of this size. So we're just looking at how that could be replicated in a potentially remote environment, and how we can work together with services to make sure that people are comfortable using the new system. And then on to the next slide, please. So the next step is in the Go Live planning. Some people will have heard of it as cutover, including the detailed communication and engagement for the full transition over to the new platform, the final migration of the data and key times that needs to be done, and any freezes on changes that will be made in our current platform, ready to move on to the new. And finally, obviously, a key part of this is the embedding of those processes. So the project will not stop at that point. It will be a case of making sure that the services see through those changes, any benefits, and any monitoring is in place to make sure that we truly are adapting and adopting the standard solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadie. We'll take any questions now, please.
Okay. Right, so we've heard the presentation. I think it's reasonable to remind members about the time that we had with Serco introduction, because I think some of us are still scarred actually with the memory of staff and payroll particularly. So that's just a reminder of the difficulty of delivering change, substantial change in IT. What you've presented to us so far from the team, it seems to me to be very good. There are some questions I've got to ask, but first of all, any members here want to ask anything of anybody? Jackie.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was just thinking of the Serco thing myself, actually, and I'm very pleased to see that you've got parallel running of the payroll, because that was one of the significant problems last time. However, there was another problem that occurred when they tried to migrate the data across. I understand that the original system held on to some of the data, and they found that they couldn't migrate it all across. And I wonder, you know, are we sure that there's not going to be any similar response this time, that all the data will go across safely? And how are you sure that that is the case? Thank you.
Thank you. So we are doing a detailed, we've got a detailed data migration plan, and we have actually already successfully completed 3 iterations of that data migration. The third one actually went very well, very successfully, and we have engaged all of the service areas, those key service areas of finance and HR and payroll, all involved in the checking and reconciliation of that data. So it's not just the people involved in the project, the service areas themselves responsible for that data are all involved in checking each line of that data and reconciling it to confirm back that it has been transferred over correctly, and we'll continue with another 2 iterations of that data migration process before go live as well.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jackie? No. Okay, thanks. Alex?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick inquiry. I'm not a businessman myself, but I know what they're like and what they're like for setting up for limited companies and then just dissolving them with little or no comeback. So I just wondered how that worked with the council, with Hoople Limited being a limited company, and the financial side of things, if anybody can shed any light on that for me, please.
Thanks. Can you do that, Louise?
Would it help
I think
if
Andrew's
I
coming in. Thank you, Andrew.
thank you. It might help if I come and help answer that question. Thank you. So to help with that assurance, the Lincolnshire County Council is now a formal shareholder of Hoople Limited, so that we, alongside with Herefordshire Council and Wye Valley NHS Trust, are shareholders of the company. That means that not only do we attend the shareholder board meetings, but in terms of the development of the system itself, we have a seat around the table in how that system's developed, in terms of its priorities over the coming years, any issues around how we manage updates and such to that. So we, although it's a limited company, it is a TECL company, by which it has to meet stringent legal requirements. One of those also being around the level of business that's put through that TECL company that has to come through public sector contracts. So to help with that assurance, as a shareholder, we are there in helping direct the company and its future transactions.
That's okay, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just come back with something else as well relating to that? Because you mentioned that Wye Valley and Herefordshire Council, that's a lot of data going through that company. So I assume you've got all that sorted as well, because it's a lot of data.
It is, but so as part of that, there are stringent requirements that go through as part of this. We work very closely with the information assurance team here at Lincolnshire County Council, with David Ingham, who leads that especially, to make sure we're assured around the security of our data, and that Hoople Limited have passed certain tests as part of that, so we get that assurance. And they carry out an assurance on a routine basis as well, to provide shareholders of the security of that data. So before entering into an agreement with them through the due diligence, we went through with information assurance to get that assurance, and we'll continue to work with the team to carry out those tests with Hoople moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Right, Hugo.
Thank you.
Morning, Chairman. Thank you. I remember actually this coming when we all started looking at this quite a while ago. We are where we are. It's the right... Nearer. Better? Okay. We are now where we are. It was the right decision, and we looked at this quite intensively. Everybody looked at it quite intensively, and we will get this resolved. My view that I remember I raised a while back on this was, in effect, it's all sort of around the complexity of the sort of, I wouldn't say perks, but of sort of some of the wages and the salaries and the extras. And I think the fire and rescue had very complicated sort of payment systems that actually caused a lot of the issues. And I remember referring it back to, in effect, the old days of the Agricultural Wages Board, where you got extra little bit of money here, there and everywhere, and if you got a dog, you got a bit more, and you had this, you got a bit more. And actually, in the end, it got so complicated. I remember even when I was in agriculture, we just streamlined it, paid a bit more money to the person, and actually they were happy to sort of forgo a lot of those things. And I think sometimes we make things so complicated that the cost to administrate the extra bits actually could be streamlined. And I think, and I don't know whether this is actually still the case, that it's all about the pay awards of the, it's not just like a salary, is it? It's not just a layer. It's not like layer 5 or post 5 or whatever. It's all the extra bits, and I don't know if there's a way that can actually streamline that. But when the report sort of says, how would we like it coming back to us? Well, we have got the report coming back to us in May 2022, all about the testing phase, which is great. But I think in there, we'd like to also see if there are any suggestions in which improvements can be made in that report, so that we can sort of not only see what actually is maybe what's gone well and what hasn't gone well, but actually maybe some ideas in which we can streamline this. Maybe it might be that we need to invest more to actually make it slicker to save going forward. And I think that's what I'd like to sort of put forward, that's what we see in that report. And then I think we have to get that report in May and then decide actually from what comes out in that report to where we then go for the future. Thank you.
Decent points there. So, sorry, Andrew or Louise.
I suppose, yeah, so just to come in on one of those points before handing over, specifically around payroll, I'll hand over to colleagues Louisa and Jason. But I think on the final point around when it comes back in May, absolutely we can have a focus around what some of those immediate benefits we expect to see from the new system at go live, and also what some of that development plan will therefore be in the following 6 months, 12 months and so on, so that we can make sure we're using the system to its fullest effect to optimise our services, business processes here in the council, including around how that supports from a payroll perspective. I'll just hand over to Jason or Louisa to pick up on the payroll specific inquiry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not included within the scope of this project to look at the varying terms and conditions of the pay of people such as the firefighters, as has been mentioned, but we're certainly working closely with the HR service on any of the complexities that we've found and the difficulties that make the system more complex because of the varying different payments and terms and conditions that people have. So I think the project has been able to highlight that back to the HR services for them to be able to review and understand that. Perhaps we can engage with them further if you would like that work doing in that sort of assessment of work doing. What we have done in respect of the complexity of the system build itself is have reviewed all of the payments and deduction codes that are in there to streamline those to make it less complex, but not it's not part of the scope of this project to review those terms and conditions and the actual payments that individuals receive.
Thanks. I'd like to ask a question that's somehow linked. Two questions, really. The first one is that we've got on page 37 the milestone. We've only got one milestone. One of the things I was saying to myself when I was reading it is that we need a sort of list of milestones that actually takes us beyond the test phase into delivery and post-delivery. So that we know that we're watching. I don't want that to sound, 1984, but essentially it's about us having a feel for how often we're going to get this coming to us. And sort of linked to that, and I suppose the question goes both to Andrew and Sadie, to Louise, what keeps you awake at night on this project? What is the sort of thing that is tentative? Not a problem, because that's what you're there to do, problem solve. But everybody, when they're on a big project, has something that they're a bit concerned about. And I'm just asking both of you to say and to share with us what, if anything, keeps you awake at night about this project.
I think for me it'd be the length of time that we are taking on this project is a concern for me, but equally I know that that's because we are passionate about getting it right, and we're completely committed to not cutting any corners. We're leaving no stone unturned, because we want the council to have that assurance that we are delivering this and that it will be accurate upon go live. So it's the length of time for me, but I am happy with the processes and method, can't say it, that we are following to ensure that we get this right, and the results as well that are coming out are giving me assurance.
Thank you. Andrew.
Hi, thank you. I think I suppose quite like Louisa, it's I suppose specifically at the moment, it's the parallel payroll run and the timeline associated with that. That's gone well over what we had originally planned, and it's the ability to be able to, whilst we are working through that meticulously, no stone unturned, it's getting access to I suppose the relevant personnel to try and make that quicker is very difficult. There are real problems in the labour market and being able to have people who are appropriately skilled and trained and available to do this. And also because of the bespokeness of the current system and the number of manual workarounds that are in the system, which we touched upon earlier, means that makes it very difficult when we are also suffering with staff shortages due to COVID, as well as a restriction in the labour market generally. So once we get through this parallel payroll run part 2 heading into PPR3, we should be far more confident then in our ability to deliver PPR3, and at that point also be confident to, I suppose, picking up on your first point, Chair, around what the other milestones might be to come back to the Scrutiny Committee. At that point, we should therefore have a much clearer indication when we could give a go live which would be realistic and would be safe, and which in turn would then be another milestone, and then also further to that a post go live review of how are we realising the benefits we set out to? What are our plans going forward? So in the report, the milestone date that was given because it was one where we felt we should have completed PPR and could come back to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. But certainly leading up to that point and in that next update, we would increase those milestones beyond that to include a go live date and a review then, and then a further review to make sure we are getting the benefits from the system.
Before I bring Councillor Hill in, can you just give us the parameters of the potential go live dates? When I say parameters, I'm talking about if all goes well, then it will be X, and if all goes well, not very well, then it will be Y. What sort of periods are we talking about? Because at the moment, we don't have much more than April 2022.
Yeah, apologies, I lost sound then. So at the moment, our intention is to be able to complete PPR2 by the end of February. So we're looking at the end of February to be able to have a clear understanding of our ability to go live. So if we can complete by the end of February, and with parallel payroll run 3 completing then by the end of April, we would always plan of I suppose a 3 months after completion of PPR would be a position at which we should go live. So what we're trying to do to make that to ensure that date as far as possible is, like the comments Sadie was talking about in the presentation earlier, we're starting a lot of that training activity now, the communications activity, everything where we've got other resources and personnel available to us, so that we can make sure that 3 month period after payroll run is complete, that we can manage to hit that. So on those that if we can complete PPR3 by the end of April, then we'll be looking at hopefully around 3 months after that point. That is dependent on no other issues in relation to, from a COVID perspective, but like I say, all being well in terms of availability of resources. If we can get more available resources in that parallel payroll running, that gives us a greater confidence to be able to achieve that. The other issue really is just around the schools' availability for test. Now, what we will have to do is if schools are really struggling to be able to support with the test because of the issues that they're facing as a result of the pandemic, we can carry out that testing internally within the council, but we'd rather that it's schools that are doing that. So we may just have to look to do a hybrid approach and maybe reduce down the number of schools who are going to be engaged in that process to make sure we can keep that running. But that would mean correlating extra support to schools at point of go live and training to make sure they were familiar with the system and confident in using it. But ultimately, it does look and feel very similar. So it's not like moving from SAP to Business World. It should be very familiar to people. And with the enhancement packs and experience packs that we're implementing as part of this, much more easier to use and more intuitive for people to use as well.
Thanks. Martin.
Yeah, just on the points there about the frustration about the delay, and I think all of us who were around back in when the contract was changed over, remember very vividly that the challenging at least 12 months the council went through, and employees and suppliers, and it's certainly a situation I don't think any of us are keen to repeat. and there was reports into what happened last time, and I think we've used those reports and the lessons learned from the previous change to make sure that we probably are more cautious this time. There's more, and there'll be enough dual runs to make sure when we do transfer, we're confident it'll be smoother. And I think, as Andrew's just said, we're not talking changing of systems, but more about suppliers, which is probably helpful. But I think one of the key lessons of the what came out of the investigations last time, it wasn't just about the supplier. It was as much to do with what the systems were like at the council, and like Councillor Marfleet's just said, how we were set up as a council, and the interface was part of that. So I think there has been a long road to try and get ourselves in a better state, so that any system can only work as well as the data it's trying to deliver. And that's been a long job, and probably taken longer than we would have liked, because COVID, of course, came along in the middle of all of this. But we need to, I think we're getting to a stage now where it is simplified, but I think there are also, I think I would agree, there's issues in terms of payroll and all that sort of stuff, which is entirely up to the council to rationalise that, to make sure that we can actually have a smooth transfer, but also systems will be simpler and then will work more effectively.
Thanks, Martin. Anyone else? Okay, I've just got one more question, and that's back to the paragraph 2.5, which talks, as Martin has done and other members, payroll testing has taken significantly longer than forecast. Okay, so I wouldn't mind knowing what the consequences of that were. In other words, why was that the case? Secondly, what would we have been doing if it hadn't have been delayed? In other words, what were the consequences of I know it sounds heavy, incorrect forecasting?
Thank you. So I suppose in terms of why it was delayed, before I just hand over to colleagues who'll give you, I suppose, more of a detailed insight to that, I think the key issue of why has been access to appropriately experienced staff in the labour market who understand our system. Ultimately, the consequence of that has been a delay to go live. I mean, so we're still going through that process. It's still got the rigour behind it, but the why it's been delayed is just not being able to utilise staff who are in that payroll system at the moment onto this work. But I'll hand over to Jason, who might be able to give you further insight on that.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, and thanks for the question. I think just to add, it's the level of rigour that is being undertaken also. So the data migration exercise that Louisa mentioned earlier, one of those first planned exercises took us much longer to complete than had been anticipated, but was gone through in order to make sure that rigour of data movement between the systems was completed successfully. So that has then built in, recognising it took longer than originally anticipated, is built into future iterations of that data migration, and absolutely to the point that Andrew has called out there, with the current team that are servicing business as usual payroll and an inability to extract some of those resources because of their work on business as usual activity, then we've looked to backfill and finding the experience and the resource to investigate and review the calculations, review the systems are correct, etc. has proven time consuming, so that has had an impact.
Thank you. Just one further question. They're very good on the answer as to why there has been a delay, but the consequences, in other words, staff that have been utilised on more and longer working on this project could have been doing other things. And I'm interested in just knowing what were those consequences. In other words, if we'd have kept to the original timetable, then staff would have been free to do other things. So things didn't get done. And I'm interested in knowing what those things that didn't get done were.
I think from the project, I think from the project resource, so some of the project resource from the project management office, would have obviously been released to have worked on other projects. I'm not aware of what those would have been, but perhaps Andrew will come in. Certainly my team, which is the current systems team, would have just moved over to support the new system. So all of our focus is on not just supporting the existing system, but working on the project as well. So we would have just then moved over to supporting the new system and any future developments within that.
Thanks, Louisa. Yeah, I think in the main what we've identified is that you know, the impact has been on perhaps some of our agility to be able to, from a programme office perspective, so our project managers to support other priorities within the council. Like Louisa set out, the Business World Systems team itself would have been delivering this as part of the move to Hoople. Ultimately, we have had to bring in additional resources to help support with this. And I think the delay has also impacted colleagues in IT who have maybe, as part of our move to the Azure cloud platform as well, so that the business world could be part of that. So I think that'd be the other area in the main where it's had that impact. So reduced our ability and agility to support other priorities in the council, whilst we make sure that we deliver the business world programme to its fullest.
Thanks for that, Andrew. John Wickens, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew covered the point I was going to make, but indeed some delay to the programme was caused because we had to ask the programme to sort of stop working almost. The original timeline for the programme implied that the platform for Business World On would be rehosted into Hoople hosting. Unfortunately, it resided in a data centre that is being switched off on the 31st of December. So Andrew and I had a bit of a crisis meeting some months ago where we realised that the risks were becoming just too high, and we injected that migration workload into our Azure programme so that we directed resources to pick up quite a complex programme with multiple platform with multiple environments. And we had to migrate that into Azure, and it was a bit tricky, but it also took some weeks. And I think Andrew, it was about 6 weeks interruption to your programme, but it was very necessary, or else indeed it would be switched off on the 31st of December.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and we absolutely supported the need and worked with IT on that. So we acknowledge the need to do that transition as recommended and in agreement with our IT colleagues. So it was the right thing for the council and the system as a whole.
Sound, thank you. Anybody else want to ask a question or make a point? No? Right, so thank you to the officers that presented the paper. If we go to the actions required, what we're charged with doing is considering the report and the presentation and providing feedback, which we've done, and review and agree future reporting requirements into OSB to monitor the progress of the redesign. We've got one milestone, and I think we're looking for more milestones, so I think that could be part of the actions required. So those in favour of what I've just read out, please indicate. Those against? Yep. Those abstaining? No. That's carried. Thank you. So we move on to paper 9.
Chair, I can't hear, but I think we're on the transformation programme item now. Sorry.
Yep, so we're on item
Aubrey.
9. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. We've got some slides to share, so just whilst they're coming up on your screen, thank you for having us along today. Just to say, as a reminder, we came to you back in June and provided an overview of the transformation programme, including why it had been set up and what it is aiming to achieve. I also talked through the governance, reporting, and shared the current position of the programme. At that point, one of the points I also shared was that following the last 18 months, work was being undertaken with our corporate leadership team to review the transformation programme focus, the model for delivery and projects, along with other major projects and programmes across the council. This was to take account of the impact of COVID and to ensure that our priorities are right now and in the future working towards meeting the needs of our communities, workforce and members. So just to check, if we can make sure that we're on slide 2, which is about the transformation programme focus. Can't hear words to the otherwise, so I'm hoping that's up on the screen for you now. So in reviewing the transformation programme, the following has been agreed as our focus for the work of the programme. Firstly, to deliver council policy and corporate priorities, all with that aim of delivering better outcomes for residents and visitors through a one council approach. Secondly, to contribute to the sustainability of our organisation through financial savings and maximising independence and resilience, all to help protect frontline services through delivering good value. And finally, to ensure that we include those high complexity and high risk projects that do require that different approach, because they're often cross-cutting programmes of change that require new ways of working and the development of a different skill set. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, on our projects and enabling everyone to enjoy life to the full. So all of our projects within the programme link clearly to the corporate plan aspirations. Our transformation programme wholly supports the corporate plan and the One Council approach. Firstly, enabling everyone to enjoy life to the full. These group of projects provide us with a focus on increasing independence in our communities and choice, to control the growing demand and increasing costs through early intervention, all with an aim of continuing to improve the outcomes for our communities, stabilising and avoiding escalating costs to make savings wherever possible and manage future cost pressures. As a local authority, we want to ensure that vulnerable adults access the right service for their level of need at the right time, leading to better outcomes for them through our Adults Improvement and Development project. Through the Children in Care transformation, we want to continue to improve the outcomes for our looked after children and young people, and have set up a number of work streams that look across a child's journey to prevent escalation of need and to improve outcomes. And our Home to School project, or Educational Travel project, has been set up to implement the results of a deep dive review into home to school transport, with the 3 main strands being on efficiencies, performance and culture and the future offer. If I could move on to the next slide, please. These projects, under providing good value council services, have been set up to improve how we deliver our functions, ensuring efficiency and effectiveness of processes whilst reducing costs wherever possible, or to ensure we are working to shape and prioritise services around residents' needs. Firstly, corporate support optimisation is a new programme of work to include the existing projects of review and business support, Business World that you've already heard from this morning, and also our corporate support services review, all looking at optimising those corporate support services. Secondly, our customer strategy implementation is working to achieve our vision of delivering strong, joined up services that are designed to ensure we are able to meet our customers' current and future needs. Our digital strategy implementation is working to achieve our vision of providing intuitive, simple and accessible digital services, ensuring we are collaborative and inclusive in how we work with each other, for our residents and with our partners. We then have our business intelligence strategy implementation, which has a vision to enable improved decision making through better understanding of our services, our partners, people and place. Our people strategy implementation, you'll all be well versed on, is working to achieve our vision to be an employer of choice in Lincolnshire and achieve the objectives that are set out in our people strategy through our One Council approach, which finally brings us to our Smarter Working programme that's building upon our journey to develop smarter working in Lincolnshire that optimises performance and support employees to deliver their best for our communities and councillors. Just to move on to the next slide, please, around high aspirations. That brings us to our Special Educational Needs and Disabilities High Needs project, at which point I'm going to hand over to my colleague Carrie Forrester for a focused look at this particular project to demonstrate that positive impact of the transformation programme. So over to you, Carrie, please.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Good morning, everybody. Now, I can't see the slides, so again, can I just check that we're on the first slide, the one that's titled Introduction? And we'll start off with that one. So as Claire says, I'm here to give you a quick update or a brief update on the High Needs Transformation Programme and where we've got. So if I can start off with just a bit of a recap in what initiated this and why we started the programme. So back in the end of 2019, we done a full review of SEND, and the data and intelligence that we gathered during that stage told us that the local offer was not sufficiently understood. That meant it wasn't used, and therefore partners and our schools and settings were missing out on access to some of the information around early intervention. So there was a whole exercise to review that. The number of refusal to assess. So this was requests for a EHCP needs assessment that were refused to move forward to an assessment. That was down in Lincolnshire to 6%, and the national figure was around 26%. So we were putting a lot through at that point. It's a huge rise in the number of VHCP plans, 3,500 or just under 3,500 in 2014, up to over 6,000 in September 20. And following an audit, the feedback from families and professionals was that 69% of children who currently had an EHCP could have had their needs prevented, reduced or delayed had they accessed the graduate approach at that time. What was key, key piece of information came out was the misaligned expectations and the fact that an EHC plan was seen as the best means of support. There was this, we need to reset the expectations around EHCP being the sort of golden tickets, so to speak, and the only way to get support. And the fact that plans, once a child or young person gets an EHCP, they're rarely ended until they leave education, and that's not necessarily the best outcome for the child, particularly when they get to the secondary school. They tend to, once they've got the plan, they hold on to it for the whole of their education career. And outcomes may be better achieved if their children could move back to a mainstream setting and have a wider access to the curriculum, for example. There was a need to move from the social model of SEND and more trauma-informed practice. And I think that the key facts down at the bottom here were if the partnership did nothing, the demand was going to continue to rise, and the demand on the high needs block would increase by over 20 million per year. You can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so one of the first tasks of the programme was to develop the high needs strategy. And within that strategy, there are 8 key elements that for planned work right across the child's journey. And within each of these 8 elements has its own work stream. The first few work streams or elements are around reducing demand. So that's about the front door. So it's about the graduate approach, but strengthening the local offer. Again, part of that, we've introduced a SEND advice line for SENCOs, which is called Ask Sal. And also looking at introducing a new assessment tool called vSEND, which is supporting decision making and benchmarking. The second sort of block of interventions are around preventing escalation. So this is looking at the assessment pathway, the statutory route, and that's around from the allocations panel at 6 weeks that decides whether requests move forward to assessment, and also looking at annual reviews. And then the final part of the programme was focusing on children and young people who already have a plan and looking at supporting that step down, focus on transition from special to mainstream. So that's the children who've achieved the outcomes and their needs may be better served in a mainstream school. Also looking at introducing a concept of a safe base provision, which again will help to keep children and young people within the mainstream and ensuring all their needs could be met within the mainstream setting. And the final element that underpins all of it is to look at prime performance and develop systems and reporting that holds us to account and mitigates the system pressures. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so what we've delivered so far. So the first part of the first third of the programme is well underway and well established now, and that was the development of Ask Sal, which I mentioned previously. That's the SEND advice line. I do have some stats further on that shows how successful Sal's been. It was received very well and continues to be highly successful in preventing requests coming through and ensuring that settings, both early years and schools, all use the graduated approach much more effectively. We've revised the local offer. It's been completely revamped and built on a new platform, much more accessible, simplified, so it's easy to navigate now. It's fast and it's effective. And within the local offer, we've also built a Send Inclusion Toolkit, which is, and the Inclusion Toolkit is like a one-stop shop for settings. It's digital, a digital resource that allows them to go in and access strategies, resources. It's got hyperlinks that take them to other websites, to commission services. So they just have that one place to go to make sure that they can get the support they need and access to all the interventions that will help them achieve that. We've also fully established vSend as a Excel document, and we're about to launch a digital version of vSend in January. That was a request from Senkos to the vSend is the toolkit, it's an assessment toolkit, was to put that on the digital platform and make it more accessible to everybody. That is due to go live in January. Within we're well on the way within the middle branch of assessments. The allocations panel, which is the 6-week panel, is very established now. And again, there'll be some figures later on to show the benefit of the 6-week panel. There's also been a lot of work on annual reviews to change the culture of annual reviews and to start celebrating achievements about where have we got, what have we achieved. And for some young children, young people, they've achieved the goals and they may be ready to move on. And again, that supports the need to be able to step down if they've achieved their goals. And it's looking at celebrating these successes and not always looking for what else can we add, which has been the culture. Again, the EHCP being seen as the golden ticket. So the allocations panel is a multidiscipline, and that's been highly successful. Any decisions that are no at that panel, so either requests don't move on to a full assessment, they get a follow-up call from our SAL. And again, it's to say, we're not sending you away with a no, we're sending you away with a whole tranche of support and what we can do to help you put all the early interventions in place to meet these needs. There's also access for, again, through our SAL, I forgot to mention earlier on, there is access to education psychologists for the more complex requests that come in. They've got that access as well, which again has been well received by settings. And the final part of the strategy is the stepping down. Currently, we have 6 children in the process of stepping down from specialist setting to a mainstream setting. That's not a quick process. That's done very gently with the full cooperation of the families, both settings involved, checking all the way through. The whole process is supported by staff to make sure that it's the right move for that child at that time. And only when everybody is totally happy that it's the best outcome for the child can be achieved by transitioning down to the mainstream will that move happen. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, here's some of the information here about how has it made a difference. I think we're all well aware that 2020 was a highly unusual year with COVID. So it's hard to be exact on what the programme has achieved because of the whole COVID impact. But as you can see up here, the requests across the whole of England were reduced in 2020. And that's the first reduction since HCPs have been, since plans have been introduced. In overall, Lincolnshire saw a 23% reduction in 2020. Nationally, that was 8% decrease. And then this is the number of requests coming in. So there's something we're doing in Lincolnshire is different. And we're fairly confident that that difference indicates some of the impact of the early transformation work. If we look across here, we'll see that 6 children have begun their transition. And then within AskSAL, so within the bubbles, you'll see there that AskSAL has reduced the likelihood for statutory send services in 48% of cases. Now, these are cases where the caller indicated that their intention was to apply for a needs assessment. And following the conversation with SAL and the intervention that was deployed, they no longer felt the need to do that. They felt they could manage the needs themselves. And you'll see in the bubble below that out of 70% of all the cases who have come via the SAL advice line have not so far requested an EHC needs assessment after that contact. Now, obviously, time will tell how that pans out, but at this moment in time, that's the figures we're showing. The feedback on the VSEND has been really strong. There's some quotes there from Senkos. And again, that strength-based approach at annual reviews has shown an impact. The toolkit's been very, very successful and well received. You'll see a quote there where I think it was Deputy Head. Yeah, Deputy Head had just gone straight to the section in the toolkit that took them straight to the resources and access that they needed. VSEND is found as being very simple to use. And again, VSEND produces a diagram that is a radar chart that really prompts that meaningful conversation. The benefits of the programme, the targets that we had set was to have a reduction in requests for the HC assessment being received, and the target was to reduce it by 10% by June 21. The reduction at that point was down 17%. The number of, if I go to the bottom one, the number of reductions in new plans being created, again, the target was to get down to 8% by April 21, and the reduction was 16%. So we're well above the targets. There is the caveat of we can never accurately set how much of that is down to COVID, but we're now in a position as things have sort of settled down a bit. So we hope anyway that we can get much more accurate figures through our prime performance moving forward. Okay, if we can move on to the final slide, please. Okay, so just to sum up some of the key prime performance messages, the number of requests for assessment has stayed consistent in October. The number converting to full assessments was 76 compared to 71 in September. This is compared to the average of 60%. Now, what this figure, this is a strange figure, but what this does actually suggest is that the right requests are coming through. So if we get the beginning right, so we tackle that front door and we make sure that the applications that come through to request a needs assessment are the ones who really need it, then those that convert to a full plan, that figure should be getting higher, suggesting that the right requests are coming through. The number of new plans created has reduced from 55 to 51 in October, and the total number of EHCPs in October was 6,516, which is below the projection of 6,506. So the programme is moving on, and so we're now in a position where we've got much more accurate reporting. We've got that real level of detail in our prime performance to get accurate positions, accurate figures moving forward. 2020 is always going to be a bit of a difficult one to get accurate figures on, because you never quite know what the impact is of COVID on the number of requests coming through. One of the issues, for example, is particularly within early years, the whole issue of children missing education in early years. That could have an impact on delayed development, and it's one of the challenges has been really clear whether it's the delay is because they've missed an element of education or whether it actually there's a special educational need. So that's one of the challenges that we face going forward. I think the biggest challenge we've got is that change in culture and changing that concept of an EHCP is a golden ticket, and once you have it, you keep it and you do not let go. We need to get the confidence in both parents and professionals around the benefits, build that confidence in that early intervention and that support, and really challenge that narrative around that golden ticket concept. Okay, I think that's hopefully that's given a bit of an idea of where we are and where we're going. I'll pass back to Claire.
Thank you, Kerry. So yeah, just to move on to the summing up slide, if you like, on the transformation programme. So just to sum up there, our review and reset has been undertaken. We did provide assurance on the governance back in June to this meeting and the structures that are in place to monitor that. We had previously agreed on a project focus for any transformation programme update item that came to OSMB, and that's why we've included the Special Educational Needs and Disability High Needs project today. So we are asking the meeting to review and comment on the contents of the report and presentation you've received this morning, and also to agree those future reporting requirements. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. both of you. Yeah, Jackie, I believe you want to speak first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've got several points, if I may. First of all, though, can I say, I mean, that was a stunning report. I dread to think how much work you must have put into that to get that for us this morning. Thank you so much. There are a couple of things I'd like to raise. I know it's to do with special educational needs, and I must declare personal interest because my grandchild is in Lincolnshire special educational needs, so I'm fully supportive. You were talking about reducing the use of special needs services, and you were referring to the 6 children who are being moved across gently. As somebody who was a teacher and has taught many children in special needs, I have to say I always have slight concern here, because frequently when the children are moved into mainstream, they become lost. They are often separated from the other children simply because of the way children behave. Not because the staff or the schools or anybody else are doing anything. And I have seen too many of these children being very lonely. So I would want to say that while the adults will be professional and will be supportive, I wonder what can be done to integrate these children in amongst the other children. That's a much more difficult thing. Excuse me, and often it's compounded by the fact that parents feel they would like their child to be in mainstream as opposed to special school, and sometimes that's not necessarily the best decision either. So my first point, therefore, is to do with integrating the child with other children. And the second point I'd like to raise, please, is to do with the access to the services. I have mentioned previously that once a child is in the special services in Lincolnshire, it would be difficult for them anywhere to get into better hands. The services are superb. However, access to those services is fraught with real concern, and the main difficulties appear to be that there are frequent errors in EHCPs as they're going forward, and also it's often not communicated to parents that the EHCPs are sent to mainstream schools for them to comment on whether they feel they can cater for the children. So to give you a specific unnamed example, a particular child, not my relative by the way, who's not toilet trained and has no speech, was told that one of the mainstream schools could cater for that child, and it was obviously not the case. And the parents were absolutely frantic and didn't get the reassurance that they needed. So my point there on this second point is that once you're in the service, it's fantastic, but getting access to the service is fraught with worry and frequent mistakes in the putting together of the information. So could I raise those and ask for some reassurance there, please? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. Over to you.
Can I come in there, Claire? I think really on I can't comment on the statutory process because that's not my field of expertise. I'm working on the transformation programme, but certainly within the support that, going to the second question first, and the support for accessing to get into the requesting an EHC needs assessment is the support there through ASSAL and through the education psychologist is really high level support, and it is about making sure that all the early interventions that can be accessed are accessed, and really supporting the schools to explore all the possibilities and make sure that they are put in place. And certainly for the children who in the transition stage, that plan will go with them and will continue to be reviewed. And the Value in Send assessment tool, the new assessment tool, really takes that whole rounded picture. So it doesn't just look at the needs profile of the child or young person, it looks at the school's ability to meet these needs. And that will include some of the things around the perception of other pupils within the school, where that child's placed within the school or setting, and how that support is applied for that child's needs. So I think that Value in Send assessment tool will also help with that. The tool has got 3 elements. It's got the child's needs, the school's ability to meet the needs, and the parents' confidence in how the child's needs are being met and how they're being met within the home. So it gives that more rounded picture. And I'm pretty sure within that, and that being reviewed regularly, will include the things like how is the child integrating into the setting. So hopefully that's something that we can monitor though, and I will feed that back to the SEND service around making sure how they're monitoring how the child feels. Also, to add to that, one of the things that we're doing with the local offer is the Children's Young Voices. So the Lincolnshire Young Voices group, which is the young people themselves, are creating videos that will go on the local offer around what's it like to be part of an annual review from a young person's point of view. So again, that will really help young people to have a voice at their annual reviews and to say how it is for them and how it, particularly if they've changed settings or transitioned, even as a transition between primary and secondary, the same concept applies. It's around how are they settling in, not just with the support they're receiving from the staff, but how they're settling in with other pupils within the school. So that will give a bit more support and help to them to make their voice heard more often. So hopefully that helps a little bit to assure you, but I will feed back to the team and make sure that that is really fully taken into account.
Thanks. Claire, do you want to say anything in addition?
No, I think Carrie's covered that for us there, and it is just to add to what Carrie said around the education, health and care plan and the review, you know, that it is child-centric. The child should very much be at the centre and the focus of that, and that includes the child's voice in that. So through that, we should be hearing absolutely the child's feelings and thoughts on their position within a school and how they are integrating as well. But no, we'll take that back to the service and head of service, and we can provide any further reassurance on that if required. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Phil and then Rob.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the presentation. First of all, can I say, can we get the slides, please? I'd very much welcome them, particularly on the special educational needs aspect. I would just say, Mr. Chairman, I found it quite difficult to hear a lot of the, and I think it is quite difficult with the virtual aspect that we're doing, and you know. Yeah, I'll just make that point that it's I don't know if I was the only one, but it's quite difficult to hear some of that, you know, coming over the system that we've got. Yeah, I saw the. I wasn't bothered about the fact that Lincolnshire's got more children higher than average in special education needs or identified with them, and having the interventions. I kind of looked at that and thought, well, that may well be a good thing. That's appropriate to the children. What I wanted to say there was, I do respect and share Jackie's concerns. You know, as a former coal-face teacher, if I can say that, my two daughters, I'm very proud to say, are also primary school teachers, not in this authority, in other authorities. And, you know, they've both been reception class teachers, and, you know, they know very early on, within days of children arriving in their first school, which children are going to end up with interventions eventually. And it takes too long. I remember, you know, in this council, it must have been 10 years ago, you know, getting a presentation about earlier intervention and the need for it, and so I'm not quite sure how far we've moved along. You know, I think we have moved along, but I'm not sure far enough. And early intervention it's not just about spending money; it's about saving money in the long term. And my daughters tell me, and as I say, this is not in Lincolnshire, that even when they identify as the classroom teacher that this child needs support, it can be literally years before they actually get the proper assessments and that they are properly looked at. So, and in that time, of course, the child is not getting the support that they need. And if they'd got it earlier, it might well be that they can come back into the fold quicker. So it is, as it is stated in under the children in care, it's preventing escalation of need is an important part of this. So, but moving to my sort of question and kind of the frustrations with it is, I think my real question is what's the barriers? You know, what is the barrier to getting in early and actually getting it sorted? And what is our average time, or what's the average age in the school life of a child where they actually get this intervention that is needed? Thank you.
Thanks. So, Claire?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll come back and some of them I can hopefully help with. Certainly on the early intervention, some of the strategies, Ask Sal, for example, is to try and get the right support at the right time. So settings can they can ring Ask Sal, or they can contact them through email and they'll ring back, but they can have a conversation that can really look into detail about the early child's needs and what support they've tried, what they've not tried. And if their needs are proven to be complex, as I said earlier, they do have that unique access to an education psychologist who can really pin down about, does this child need to apply for an HCP, or can they be managed within the mainstream setting with some of the early intervention, the graduate approach? So that you've got that expertise in there. And if it's a child who needs an intervention, that will go straight through to a request, and that will be in the process. And within 6 weeks of submitting the request, that is reviewed, and that is, if it's appropriate to move on to a full assessment, that will happen at the 6-week stage. And by the 20-week stage, within the statutory pathway, they'll move on to a plan if that's the right choice for that child. So that early intervention is helping them not just to prevent those who don't need an assessment coming through. And that was one of the issues that we found in the review, is to say 69% of those that had come through, and because we were saying yes to everybody, they were getting a plan and then getting stuck with that plan, and they didn't actually need a plan. That early intervention is making sure, as well as preventing that from happening, those that do need a plan, they get into the system as quickly as possible. So it's both sides of the coin. The key phrase is about the right intervention at the right time and in the right setting. So that's what we're trying to do through that intervention. The other intervention that will support that is that value and send assessment tool, because again, that's not just for children who have got a plan, that's for all children. So as soon as the setting feels there's something that this child might need additional support with, they can use value and send assessment tool to really understand what that need is, and that goes into a level of detail that can give them that full picture. And if that's a child who, from that doing that assessment, they find this child needs an intervention via a plan, again, they can get into the system quicker. So it's doing both sides. So it's preventing those that don't need a plan coming through, but also making sure that those do get through as quickly as possible. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, Rob.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I just pick up on the point about access to educational psychologists? I seem to recall historically access to ed psychs has always been a bit of an issue in terms of availability and waiting lists. I wonder if we could be updated on the situation on that now. Thanks very much, Chairman.
I can only update you on, I can't update on the statutory process. We do have locum EPs, but I can get back to you on that information. We need to speak to the SEND service for that. But I can advise on through the Ask Sal, we have 1.5 days a week of intervention from an EP time to be able to support at that prevention work and give that early advice. So we've got that available through Ask Sal, and it's managed. Ask Sal sort of the gatekeepers, so they will make the decision as to whether that case is complex and would benefit from EP advice. So we do get that in early. As for the statutory process, I would have to get back to you on that and talk to the team as to the access and the timescales around getting the EPs involved in the assessments as part of the statutory process. So sorry, I can't answer that in full, but certainly from the early intervention, we do have 1.5 days a week of education psychology time to support SAL. that helps.
Is that okay, Rob?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, sir. I hope 1.5 days a week is sufficient. That's all I was going to say. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thanks for that.
It is proven to be sufficient. Again, it is fully used. It is fully used, and when you get a copy of the slides, you'll see that is having an impact again in the number of the progress after having that EP intervention. We can certainly get back to you on the feedback on EPs in the statutory process if that's required. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully endorse what Councillor Brookwell and Councillor Dilks has said. I too have a personal interest in this. I actually was statemented when I was at school many moons ago. With your permission, Chairman, I've read the background papers to this, so I'd very much like to comment on those as well as what's before us in the SEND arena, because I believe it's relevant. Firstly, on the background papers, in terms of points 2 and 3 on page 3. In the background papers, it's my personal experience, and to a lesser extent also professional experience, that whilst some mainstream schools have a strong knowledge of effectively supporting pupils with SEND, or SEN as it was in my time, this in my view is an exception, not the rule, unfortunately, and this is not a criticism of Lincolnshire. This is a national issue. It is by no means a criticism of the service in Lincolnshire, because it's very good and it's a very hard issue to deal with. Turning to the national and local context, is there a risk of removing specialisations from special educational needs schools, that they become a jack of all trades and can do everything but a master of nothing? I was at a school that was specialised, and I've seen the good side and the bad side of specialisation. I had immense, brilliant support up until my post-16 years, when, because the specialisation changed due to schooling needs and needs of wider pupils and more pupils with more high intense needs, it no longer became appropriate for me to be at that school. So I then made that decision with my parents at the time to move into a different setting, which was a further educational college in due course. But I believe that a removal of specialisation could actually be potentially, if not done correctly, quite harmful. Turning to EHCPs, because I know that's been talked about a lot, the reason parents want EHCPs is because actually, certainly in the current system, they provide the most statutory protection legally. That is why they're asked for. And they are very difficult, and they were hard to get when I was a child. They're even harder to get now, because I've assisted people in a professional capacity with the issues around EHCPs. They're very hard to get hold of. And they, as both Councillor Dilks and Councillor Brett have alluded to, teachers can know the issues and the time it takes. It can take years, and the harm is quite sufficient. In terms of wanting children to step down into mainstream school, that can actually be where harm occurs, because the point in time, it is not the right setting for the child. Again, I've got personal experience of being in a mainstream school when, through being bullied, actually, it was quite serious and it was quite harmful. So I'm very concerned that there is this want, appropriateness aside, that there is this want for them to step out of that situation and that safety net, if you will. I'd be interested to know, for children and young people who are at SEND schools, are their life chances or their academic outcomes worse on average? Because that's certainly what comes across in the second paragraph on page 6 of the report that we have, that I've read. And finally, Chairman, page 6 goes into a very interesting debate around the medical and social model, and it's been my personal experience in all walks of life, not just at college, but also in the world of politics and employment and further education at my further education college, that actually the medical model is what takes place in society at large in most cases. This is also due to how policy is interpreted, because it's made, and this is not a swipe at anybody, but it's made by people who are trying to be helpful, but who haven't got the issues themselves, so they don't have lived experience, which is not anybody's fault. I wouldn't wish a disability on anybody, but you need to, it's a bit like with the drop curve. If you say, oh, this person needs this, unless you speak to somebody with that issue, you're assuming what they need, which of course is when issues arise. And I would say that there's nowhere in the country at the moment that works on a social model. And whilst in the ideal world, yes, we should work to that social model, because that is what actually as a country and as a nation we should be doing. Personally, I think it's quite dangerous at the moment to start doing that with education, when actually, if you look in the wider world, the medical model is what's practiced, and it works. And there's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix what ain't broke. And as I said, it's very difficult to acquire the support, and I have serious concerns that people who are, if you were like myself, who would be deemed to have quite a minor disability, I use the term minor in inverted commas, there is a very serious risk they will fall through the cracks. And when a child falls through the cracks and doesn't receive the right support, that leads to potentially mental health issues, which then means they need potentially quite serious intervention from mental health teams. That then means they could have lesser educational attainment, which then means you have an issue of will they ever be able to be employed in the same manner that they otherwise would be if the support was correct, which then means they have to have intervention from the Department of Work and Pensions. There's a host of other interventions that I could reel off as long as my arm, and I wouldn't want them to struggle and be left. Thank you.
Quite a few points there made by Tom, including going into the social and medical model. So, Claire, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor, for all those questions. Just also, obviously, being mindful of time and the fact that the documents you were obviously referring to, Councillor, were those that were considered by Children and Young People's Scrutiny back in September. So just mindful that not everybody else in the membership might have been privy to those. So I wondered, as obviously our focus today is around the transformation programme and the high needs project as part of that, is it best, could I make a recommendation they're considered by Children and Young People's Scrutiny, Chair, at all?
What's your feelings about that, Tom?
Also, part of that, part of the comments are part of the background report, but actually, some are in relation to the current paper, such as the context of removing the specialisation, I believe, is talked about in the paper before us, and certainly the point around the step down of children into mainstream school is part of this paper, and the want to not, or to avoid, shall I say, not want, but to avoid the use of EHCPs is part of this paper, and I think it's very important that we address this, because, as I said, the reason certainly in a personal and a semi-professional experience, the reason that EHCPs, or statemented as was, I'm showing my age, are asked for by parents is because that gives them the most statutory protection and rights under the law as it currently stands, which is why they're asked for. Now, I understand why the county as a body want to move away from statementing as was, and they want the early intervention. I fully support early intervention for special educational needs. The earlier you intervene, the better the chances are for that individual. But early intervention does not mean the child does not need to be statemented or will not need to be statemented. And this tone of wanting to come away from that concerns me, and I think that needs to be addressed here because that's relevant.
Okay. Claire, if I can come in on the transitions, the step down. So again, just to give reassurance that you can see the numbers are really low in the step down, because it's only where it's the best outcome for that child. And these are mostly children that are in, or young people that are in the secondary education stage, because it's about, and the 6 that are in transition at the moment, it's where they're academically able, and the special schools aren't giving them the access to the wider curriculum, so they're restricted and their outcomes are less by staying in special school. But the process is very carefully managed to make sure that that does achieve the best outcome for that child. And I was trying to find them quickly, but I can't find them quickly, but I've got some comments from the children who are in that process and how much benefit they're seeing themselves from that, which we can share if that would be beneficial. I can't get my hands on it right now, unfortunately. But certainly the 6 that are in the process, 2 of them have just started, 4 of them are well through the process last term. It can take up to 6 months of having dual registration, so they're still in the special school registration. They're supported by the special school to make sure mainstream works for them, that they fit in, that they can achieve their outcomes there, and it's very, very carefully managed. And if it's not the best outcome for the child, they will remain in the special. They don't lose that registration until everybody, family, the young person, and both settings are 100% convinced that's the best outcome for the child. So it's not a move them down for any other reason other than that's the best outcome for that child, particularly at that when they get to that older age level and they're academically able of achieving more, but they can't access that whilst they're in a special school setting. They still have their EHCP, they've still got the plan in place. They're just moving to a setting in mainstream where they can actually get access to a wider curriculum and achieve better outcomes, more better outcomes for their future. So hopefully that gives a little bit more reassurance.
Just got a view about time. I think the first point I think we could make is that in relation to the paper that we've got before us, special education needs is under a consideration to move into a legacy status and not an active status. That's the difference between where we're ongoing monitoring and where it's called legacy status. I understand that the CLT and the executive have agreed that this should not be the case, and that adults improvement and development, children in care transformation and special education needs and disability will remain active and be part of the monitoring process. That's one point.
James, would you like to comment on that?
If I could just go on for a moment and then come back to James. Secondly, we've got the opportunity actually at our next meeting on the 27th of January, when there's going to be a report from Children and Young People Services, and that was being mentioned in our debate, and I'm sure that you could raise it and talk to, I'm sure Rob would be aware of what we're talking about and will be able to respond. So that's the second point. And I think it's also relevant to say that having dealt with those, that we've got a transcript of what you actually said available to us, which I'm sure that that Claire's team can look back at, and if there's any individual points that she wants to address, then that can be done outside this meeting. But yes, James, you're going to comment on the legacy status and the deferral.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to mention that this is in the paper as a proposal. However, the timing of it, at the time that was written, that was correct. It was a proposal that was being considered. There wasn't sufficient time for it to go through CLT prior to the report being changed. But when it did come to CLT, whilst there's an absolute understanding of the need to consider when projects have got to a point where they can move out and become business as usual, it was felt by CLT that these three in particular were A, big, B, really critically important for us as an organisation, for the people using those services, and therefore it was considered that they shouldn't be moved out. They would remain within the transformation programme. And that would mean that they'd continue to have that focus both from the corporate transformation programme, but obviously within the services as well. And Heather and Glenn, in addition to a range of other staff working on them, are actively involved in that. And I think your latter suggestion, Chair, if I may say, is a really good one around we can feed back on specific information that's been requested, and we'll try and do that the best we can. But equally, we can use that next meeting to pick up any points that still aren't you're unsatisfied with, or you want further explanations on.
That's okay, Tom. Very briefly.
Thank you. You mentioned that in the special education needs setting, that the children who are more academically able, they don't have access to the wider curriculum. Why is that? Certainly, again, showing my age, when I was within that system, because I was academically able, I had access to that wider curriculum because it was appropriate. Why has that changed?
Is there such a thing as a brief answer?
Carrie, are you still with us on the call?
Yeah, I'm just coming back in. Just turn my camera back on. You should have me back. Yeah, I think it's more a matter of the number of subjects that the special schools, simply by the size of the special schools, what they have to cover, they're not able to offer as wide a range of subjects as as the secondary schools can. So it's just they just haven't physically got the staffing and the ability to offer as wide a range as a secondary school. So that's mainly the reason behind that.
Fine, thank you. Thanks. Anyone else want to speak on this matter? No? Okay, so the board is invited to review and comment on the contents of the report and presentation and agree future reporting requirements. Okay, future reporting requirements, certainly there'll be something I would suspect in children and young people's, and I think that what's being proposed is that we have projects that are part of the transformation programme. Moving forward as to when we next review it, it would seem to me to be reasonable to look at 3 months. Does that seem satisfactory to people? Okay, thank you. So that's what we're voting on. Can we vote in favour of that proposal? Those indicate, please. Thank you. Those against? And those abstaining? That's carried then. Thank you for the presentation that you gave to us, Claire and the team, and we look forward to a further report in 3 months' time.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Item 10 is the Developer Contribution Scrutiny Review, first monitoring report on developer contributions.
Thank you, Chair. I assume I'm live and everybody can see me. I was going to start saying good morning, but I think it's good afternoon now, so good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to come along and just give you an update on where we're at with the developer contributions work. This is obviously the first monitoring update on the recommendations which were agreed with the work with Scrutiny Panel A, and as you will see within the report, 6 recommendations were accepted, which included an action plan. Against those recommendations in the report, we have provided an update by the assigned lead officer. As we all know from previous reports, the Council are very keen to ensure that the Council has a leading role in shaping and supporting the place of Lincolnshire. An integral part of that shaping and supporting is us leading in a very proactive way with key stakeholders, which includes communicating with the general public. As you will see from the updates in the report, particularly in relation to recommendations 2 and 3, relationships with stakeholders is continuing and is being strengthened to ensure that the types of communities which the Council expect are being communicated in the best ways possible. In addition to that, the statutory responses that we make in response to planning applications are now also being posted on LCC's website. So all, which will include the general public, now do have visibility on the advice and the requests that we are making in relation to individual applications. In addition to those postings on the websites which are currently being done, as we move forward with the developer contributions works, again, they will be strengthened and changed to include the whole Council position on developer contributions requests as we move forward. Clearly that at the moment will follow the establishment of the strategic approach, which we're busily working on in the background. But again, once that is implemented and once the systems are up to speed with the service areas that have an interest in the developer contributions debate, then all service areas requests will be reported and recorded on the website. So all will have visibility over those requests. If I may, just coming back to the shape and supporting agenda of communities, I would like to just focus a little bit on recommendation 6. To us, this is probably one of the first sort of key milestones in the action plan, and as hopefully most of you will be aware, and I think I'm aware that a number of the committee members did attend the sessions in September, we did put on sessions with members to raise awareness of developer contributions and also to explain to members their role in the whole developer contribution process. I think the feedback that we received on the day was very positive, which was good. But again, as I previously mentioned, as a number of the members on this committee were also present at those presentations, I would like, after I've finished with my overview, to see comment from the committee today on how they felt that presentation went. Initially, we're looking for feedback on whether we thought it was beneficial, when we thought that the relevant messages got across to members, and I suppose in particular whether we need to do any more with members at this stage to reinforce the message and to raise the awareness with members as a whole on developer contributions. The reasons why I asked this, and I'm sort of stressing this point, is because we have met a number of members individually in one-to-one sessions, if you like, face-to-face, where we have had the opportunity not just to talk to them about individual planning applications in their patches which they've been notified of, but to have a more global walk round of parishes so we can start getting, if you like, ahead of the game with members and with our constituents about building awareness of what growth activities are to come, and not just be in the arena where we are reacting to individual applications as they drop into the county. And again, we as officers certainly think there's great benefit to be had from that, because when we do respond to applications, they are very, very time sensitive, which was explained in the presentation. So again, this proactive engagement with members, we think is absolutely critical and will give absolute benefit, because we can start building, you know, an early picture of what it is members and the public, you know, wish to see as mitigation on the back of developments. So I don't want to labour that point anymore, and I don't really want to go into too much more detail on the report, because I think the updates in there are self-explanatory. So if I can come back to you now, Chair, with any comments that you or the committee would like to make.
Thanks for that, Warren. Yep, Jackie first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for that report. Developer contributions are a hot topic in my division at the moment. There's a feeling of considerable unfairness about the way the various 106 monies and SIL monies are vied off elsewhere. And often the location where the developments take place actually get nothing. And sometimes that's fair because they may not need something on a particular occasion, but we are finding that sometimes this money is concentrated in particular areas very much to the detriment of other communities. I have one area which is perceived to be well off, but the reality is it's an area lived in by ordinary working families, and because the money for their development is sent off elsewhere, when the children want a playgroup, for example, the only place they've got to go is the floor of a local pub, because there is no community centre, whereas the money that was raised by that area is off to places like Gainsborough. So what I'd like to say, and this is being raised constantly with me, it's not something that just goes away. What can we do to increase the fairer distribution of this developer money, so that the areas who are receiving the builds and the development can benefit? Thank you.
The challenge for you, Warren, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't think that's just a comment which is applicable to the division that's just been talked about. I think it is a global thing. But what I would say, you know, particularly in the authorities that do operate still, you know, that feeling of unjust and an unfair spread of money, you know, it is a regular story we hear. I will come back to that engagement with members and the offer that the officers and myself are making, because I think what is often missed, that SIL and this spread of money to the strategic need, if you like, isn't it? You know, in addition to that, there is also local need, there is also local mitigation, which is why I believe it is absolutely critical that we do start working more closely and more better to start understanding that local need. Because again, as we said in the presentation, this will never be a wish list and everything we ask for we will get. But I think the more we know about what the local need is and what the local impact from particular development is likely to be, we're in a far stronger position to start negotiating the fact that local mitigation towards these local schemes is necessary. So I understand your frustration. It's not specific to that division, and hopefully through when we do start developing this more strategic approach in a more sort of strategic way that we can, I don't really like to use the word strategic because I do think the importance here is local. But once we start, establishing these frameworks which all service areas will work under, then we will start to build a sort of a bigger, more collaborative, more coordinated picture of what local needs are. So it's probably not answering your question, but there is more to developer contributions just still. And although we probably think that all of the money is going to the bigger towns or the bigger cities, there is still a local opportunity to ask for something which is clearly our role.
Of course. Yep. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for that. I understand it's a difficult question, but if this is something that is coming up regularly and is perceived as unfair, as you're saying here, then perhaps it is unfair and we need to be looking at it and changing it. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks. Anyone else? No? Okay, I suppose one of the issues that is worth mentioning, not necessarily for action, is that there's, as was said, marked differences between councillor areas, and particularly in urban areas with a high density of population and housing. There is sometimes a feeling that developer contributions don't apply in those areas. So in one sense, the benefits sometimes are transferred from those parts of urban areas which do get developer contributions into those that don't. Other than that, okay, we've had our discussion. Excuse me. So the board is invited to review and comment on the progress made on implementing the recommendations from the developer contributions review. We've had the contribution from Warren. Do we agree that the progress has been satisfactory on implementing the recommendations from the developer contributions review? Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? That's therefore agreed. Thank you. So that was paper 10 on the developer contribution. The next paper on page 55, excuse me, relates to the update on IMT services, data services, and Serco contract performance. Sue Klein's giving the presentation.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Sue.
Sorry, John. Well,
And John
thank
as
you.
well.
John, did you want to give an overview as head of IMT before I start?
Yes, indeed. The report presented at item 11 is part of a quarterly reporting pattern ascertained with yourself, Chair, to keep OSMB informed and assured on the operations and activities of the Council's IMT services. This quarter we report again in two parts. We have Appendix A, updates on the function, progress and future work programme of the Data Services Department, and shortly I'll introduce Sue, who is our Head of Data Services. And possibly at the end of that, Sue, if you could pause for any comments or queries from the board, given Appendix B is quite a different subject. Updates on Serco's performance against its KPIs over the period June to October, which will be presented by the manager, Paul Elverstone, who's our Contracts and Licensing Officer. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you, John. So as said, I'm presenting Appendix A of the IMT update relating to data services. So we've continued to establish and embed the function of data services team in the last 12 months. As mentioned in the report, we're supporting key pieces of work such as the implementation of the business intelligence strategy. We continue to help and support service areas in the management and transformation of their data to assist improvements in their reporting. Some examples of key improvements over the last year include making available a large data set from the Care Quality Commission, which relates to providers of regulated services and in particular their inspection outcomes that have been released. These are services such as residential and nursing care, which are all very important. This data has assisted colleagues in commercial services and is about to be shared wider within the organisation to provide a common data set or one version of the truth. It's updated automatically overnight direct from the Care Quality Commission via an API, and it removes any need for manual processing within service areas whereby they're checking websites and updating spreadsheets. But that data set's made available to them and they can embed that within their reporting requirements. We've also moved a large number of legacy data sets into the data services area to be managed centrally on behalf of those service areas. Again, reducing storage costs and ensuring that we're adhering to the general data protection regulation for that data. We've been working with the Home to School Transport Service to provide a reporting solution for their new Home to School application solution, which is going live next year. And then more recently, we've been working with colleagues in corporate finance to define their reporting needs, which when implemented will again remove manual processes and create a central data set for use by all finance colleagues, enabling more efficient and timely reporting. So coming on to the next 12 months, key activities to note will be the consumption of data from core LCC databases such as Business World and the Mosaic Case Management System. This again to streamline reporting and data processing, reducing costs for service areas who are maybe using other solutions at present. We'll continue to promote the use of Power BI as a reporting solution and its benefit to service areas and colleagues who wish to consume reports. And we will begin to look at the implementation of the Power Platform, which is Microsoft products, Power Automate and Power Apps, which assist in task automation and creation of simple applications, further reducing manual and repetitive processes. That concludes my report, Chairman. I welcome any questions before handing over to Paul for Appendix B.
Thanks. Thanks very much. This report sets out a lot of detail about what you're doing. I suppose I'm asking the question, how well are you doing it? That means, in a sense, in relation to the stuff that's down here, for example, those that are set out in the aims of the data services function and what it says about progress. It's a question of measurement. And I don't get a feel from this paper, not was it was intended to, but it's a question about whether it ought to have been. That involves councillors talking to senior officers about what we should be monitoring. So I'd be interested in knowing something, Sue, about how well this has gone. I mean, for example, increased capacity in the team to support the transformation programme. Yes, it's increased capacity, but we heard earlier in the transformation programme about some of the issues. So it's just a question of a feel for how we could monitor through numbers, maybe, without putting you out to too much work, so that we get a feel for how well the aim of the data services function is doing.
Thank you. In relation to the point you mentioned, that was actually increasing capacity of the data services team to actually support the some elements of the transformation programme. And that is in particular in relation to a piece of work to move the corporate performance team from a system called Business Objects to using Power BI, which looks at all of the data that's available for them and transitions that to platforms that are available as part of our Microsoft Office 365 licensing. We certainly will we've spent the last 12 months really trying to embed the data services function as a corporate function within the organisation, and the point around measures I think is very relevant, and it's something that we can look at. We don't have those in place at the moment, but certainly something that we can begin to identify. John, did you want to make any comments on that one?
Yes, I mean, the data services is only recently productionised and is sort of going through its maturity curve, as it were, but it's actually one of few services that we deliver internally. So, but it has to be sort of measured and assessed like any other service, regardless of whether it's provided by KCOM or Serco or internally. So, what you'll see as we sort of evolve the IMT service, and particularly the planning involved as we approach the end of the Serco contract, you'll see data services sort of assessed and measured by Paul's team, actually, you know, in terms of SLAs and KPIs and similar, councillor. So we will be developing over the coming months, thoughts and processes to sort of capture that performance data. I think an important part of that, though, is not so much us marking our own product, as it were. It's also getting sort of CSATs, customer satisfaction, out of the people consuming those services. We can't do everything everybody wants us to do in one go. Their demand outstrips supply, and it's for CLT to sort of set those priorities. But as we meet them, you know, we very much hope to include the kind of perception of the people consuming the service. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. It's just that I'd like to get it on the radar so that we can have a look between us, including the chief executive, because I'm sure that there's internal management going on through the different systems, the hierarchies that we've got. But if it's coming to our meeting, then we would like, I think, to have some data on how that show how effective and the work is, and whether performance is reaching the targets that have been previously set. That's all. No more than that. Anyone else? Okay, well, the board is requested to seek assurance on the performance of the IMT Data Services Department and the Serco contract. I think we have started to seek assurance, and I think we can get agreement on that, but I think that there's more to be done. So, bearing that in mind, is that a way forward for us? If so, can we vote in favour, please? Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's agreed. Thank you, Sue and John, for your presentation.
Chair, we had Appendix B, which goes through the Serco KPIs. Did you wish to see those, or would you like to defer those?
Yeah. Serco, sorry, my fault. The Serco contract performance, the reason I read it in detail, and all the KPIs, have been met for October 21st, with the exception of one where there's an explanation. But I should have asked members, do you want a discussion? And if so, who would like to speak on the KPIs for the Serco contract? Anyone? Anything you would like to add? Paul there, if you... Paul? Anything unusual? We've had the Serco contracts going back a long, long time. Sorry, the contract performance going back a long, long time. And we've now got to the stage where it's almost business as usual. But is there anything about this particular month that you want to tell us about, or indeed the quarter?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I think it's worth noting, you've said it's almost business as usual. I think a couple of the headlines from this particular period is that during this period, we've actually replaced one KPI that was having a bit of an adverse effect on satisfaction, and replaced it with two new ones. We are keeping an eye on the performance. We're not sitting on our laurels. We are making sure that the KPIs we've got remain relevant and remain such that they are driving the behaviours that we would like to see out of our suppliers. So I think that's the point I'd like to take, just put forward. Thanks for that.
To explain that, Chair, the previous KPI only measured something called service requests. So where a consumer of the service wanted a service to be provided, but not a break fix scenario. So if they had a fault, an incident in our parlance, the KPI did not measure the delivery of incidents, break fix interactions. And when the service was under pressure, that had the perverse effect of our provider favouring the delivery of service requests, because that's where the penalties lived, over the break fix scenarios. So we've now balanced the performance on those two activities through a long process of negotiation. They have come into effect, and they've almost immediately had the right effect. So I just thought further explanation might be appropriate.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. So to go back, excuse me, do we agree now with the additional contribution about the monitoring of the Serco contract, that we're in agreement with the recommendations, which is that we sought assurance on the performance of not just the IMT Data Services Department, but also the Serco contract? So if we could have another vote, please. Those in favour? Those against? Abstaining? Thank you, that's carried. Okay.
Chair, if I also might interrupt briefly, I noted the councillor's comments regarding the council chamber sound quality, and I will contact Democratic Services and undertake some tests to see if there's anything we can do about improving that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you for that. Okay, so if we now move on to item 12, agenda item 12, which is the Scrutiny work programme. Set out before us, we've got Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. Anyone would like to present that report? Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Committee activity for Adults and Community Wellbeing, Scrutiny Committee. The committee has had a busy 2 meetings since it last reported to the board. I would like to highlight the pre-decision scrutiny item on the extra care housing development in Welton, which the committee considered in October. This represents a key development in supporting people to live independently for as long as possible. I'd also like to highlight the important work undertaken by the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board, considered at our December meeting, which reports to this committee on a 6-monthly basis. The working group on free sugars, despite the name, free sugars are not good for us. They are defined as all sugars added to the foods by the manufacturers, cooks and consumers, and sugars naturally preserved in honey, syrups and unsweetened fruit juices. In fact, actually, I'll go even further, that when you really start to analyse it, the amount of carbohydrates that we eat, and potatoes and rice, and actually all the sort of sugars related to that, it's no wonder why we do struggle with the volume of sugar that we consume. We are still progressing. We've got a meeting tomorrow to explore the various works undertaken by the LGA, further details on the whole system approach in the councils, plus our own findings following a post on the NHS Futures website. So currently we're just bringing that all together. I think we know where we're sort of going to end up, which will be really to sort of, I suppose, make more awareness, get the right information, so that when the various health checks are carried out by public health, whether it's the children's or whether it's adults, that actually when they're sort of the alarm sounds, we will be able to give a much simplified and highlight where really a lot of the areas are that actually cause sugar consumption. Other than that, the other thing we went through in the last committee was various Q2 checks, All in all, most things are all pretty good. Still, COVID does sort of throw the odd blip into things like smoking cessation, but we are, and the one new Lincolnshire team do keep learning from it all as they adapt to working virtually, and actually their offers got better and better. So not only just for the smoking cessation, but weight loss and all the other bits. So that they've sort of, they're certainly not shying away from their responsibility. They might sort of not get the best performance indicators at times, but actually they really have learned to adapt under not just being able to do face-to-face meetings all the time. Other than that, we are as we are on the forward agenda, and what I would say is it's pretty packed. There's not a lot of spare time for a lot more items. So at the minute, it's really a case of what really is sort of pre-decision scrutiny and performance and monitoring. The next committee, we are planning to have a training session after the committee with a short break for lunch, and then go straight into a training session really focused on the new white paper that has been released, and just get into detail about it, the implications to this council and to residents, and actually have a much greater understanding. So that's the current situation in terms of adults. Thank you.
Thanks, Hugo. Just on the last point you made about the briefing on the white paper in relation to adult social care reform, having a briefing session, is that, or could you make it available to all members of the council? Because I think that that we all have some interest in it, because it changes significantly the lives of people who we represent. So is that something that you as chair of the committee would consider?
Good point. I think the best thing is I'll have a word with Glenn and just discuss it, because I think if we're not careful, we could end up where we get a... I agree, I think it is very important for everyone to take part in it. It's whether we do 2 training sessions and say, let the Council of Development run one, and we as adults run one. And the only... Well, we could do it together. Would have to be a bit more orchestrated in effect that whatever time we finish, we'd start the training session at 2 o'clock. I'll have a word, and I think we perhaps, and I'm only, the other thing I'd just be a bit sort of shaky on is we don't really know where we're going to be in January in terms of operational in this chamber. Now it might be that we do something, say, with some people and then try and scale it, but I actually think we perhaps need 2 training sessions. Leave it with me. I think I'll have a word with Nigel and Glenn and see where we go with that one.
Just heard Nigel comment, got to be careful with numbers. The point being this, if it's going to be down the line, as it were, then in one sense it doesn't matter how many people there are. If it's face-to-face, yes, I completely agree. So it may well be that circumstances will determine whether it happens or not.
Sorry, Chairman, I am actually just arranging the training. We're not certain yet whether we've got access to the council chamber, so the hybrid facility might not be possible. It's whether it's due to take place in person. So I'll just discuss that with Councillor Marthley afterwards as to whether we're able to do that anyway, if that's okay.
That sounds great. Hugo, talk to Emily and Nigel. That's great.
I mean, just on that, Mr. Chairman, I mean, just sort of picking up, in some sense, some of this relates to sort of your comments at full council last Friday, and what are we all doing? And I think as we're getting a lot more detail, the white paper's coming through, the detail, the impact, officers will be starting to work up really what is going to be the impact to this council. you know, I know sort of highlighted that we are in discussions and have highlighted this to our MPs because of the impact. And I think that actually having more involved in on the training might be that actually we perhaps should send a letter back to the Secretary of State and highlight some of these issues. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people do. And some, you know, some of the sort of issues maybe within the white paper. So I think the more we are aware, the better. So.
Do you want to? No, I think we covered it. Yep. Okay. Anybody want to ask any questions about the planned work programme for adults and the comments that have been made by Hugo? Nope. Okay. Right. So we, excuse me, Health Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Carl, yep.
If I may take the report as read and just give a bit more of an up-to-date verbal update now, if that's okay, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end. The Lincolnshire Acute Services Review has occupied a considerable amount of the committee's time over the last 3 meetings, as is clear from pages 72 and 73. Referring to page 73 and the 15th of December meeting, the committee received presentations on the plans for an orthopaedic centre of excellence at Grantham Hospital. Much of the discussion centred on transport for patients who would struggle to reach Grantham, for example, from the east coast of the county. The other items centred on plans for medical beds at Grantham Hospital. These plans are linked to the services provided at the proposed urgent treatment centre in Grantham. In each case, the committee agreed that the working group would consider further details at its working group. The committee has the benefit of completing its response to the Lincolnshire Acute Services Review by the 31st of January, which the committee will be approving on the 19th of Jan. However, I would remind everyone else that your own individual responses and any planned responses from district and local councils or community groups are due by next week, the 23rd of December, when the public consultation closes. Just to update you on the Humber Acute Services Programme, we also considered this yesterday, which is a pre-consultation engagement stage. This is likely to affect the services provided at Diana Princess of Wales Hospital in Grimsby and Scunthorpe General Hospital, which are used by a significant number of people in both East and West Lindsey. So it's important that the committee keeps its eye on this as well. The committee will be finalising its response to the pre-consultation engagement at its January meeting and will of course participate in the full consultation in 2022. Our future programme for the 19th of January, in addition to the items already mentioned, the committee's preference is to separate the lessons learned item from the Lakeside update, and as the CQC is likely to report on Lakeside in February, this is more appropriate for the committee's February meeting. The committee is also keen to receive a report and presentation from the East Midlands Ambulance Service. For although the committee received an update report in February this year, EMAS management have not attended the committee since the pandemic due to the pressures on them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody want to make any contributions on anything that's been raised? Yeah. Ray.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment, Chairman. Following our meeting yesterday, there's been a number of comments on Facebook saying that the acute service review hasn't been publicised across Lincolnshire. If you recall, several months ago last year, Councillor Whittington put a motion through council which was fully supported to say that every household in Lincolnshire should be notified about this review. And many comments from residents are saying that they don't know anything about it. So do you agree that we should press forward with only a week to go to make sure that the CCG does consult with every household in Lincolnshire?
Yes, I do personally. We can make a recommendation. You could put forward a motion very briefly, a simple one, just like you have done, for us to discuss, because then it could then become the policy of OSMB, and our media department could then action it as a result of what we've said. I'd be interested in your views, Carl.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Wootton. We were told by the Clinical Commissioning Group, Councillor Hutton, as you recall, that every household would have received something via the post. And every time we've spoken to them, they have said every household in Lincolnshire has. Personally, I haven't received anything, so no, I'm sort of dubious on that. However, they have tried to do it, but I do believe it's gone through and potentially could have been mixed up with takeaway menus and so on. So I don't think it's good enough, and I think it would be worthwhile for OSMB to push that, and for our own comms team to ensure that we get something out, just to try and ensure that we're once again pushing it, saying the deadline's on its way.
I mean, if members agree, then we could say something positive rather than negative, rather than actually complaining about what hasn't happened. We could actually say as a reminder that there is an imminent closing date, and get the comms team to deliver on that. Yep.
Just another comment. What was disappointing as well yesterday was that the CCG informed us that they'd received 2,000 consultations. Now, going back to 2013, we had a consultation for Shaping Health in Mid-Kesteven, just for that area alone, received 3,000 feedback. So I don't believe that every household has been notified that this consultation is in progress at this moment in time.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Okay, so is it agreed that we ask the comms team to send out a positive reminder to all to the media, reminding people that there's an imminent closing date on the NHS consultation programme? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Can we vote on that then, please? Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? No, that's carried then. Okay. Is there anything anybody wants to raise about anything that Carl said, other than in relation to the NHS consultation? No? Okay, so we've had two reports, Hugo's and Carl's. Just looking briefly, the board is required to determine whether it's satisfied with the activity undertaken since the 30th of September by the adults and the Health Scrutiny Committee and the planned work programme. So everybody's had the chance to read both the activity undertaken and the work programme. So those are the requirements that we're voting on. Can we vote in favour, please? Those in favour of that recommendation? Those against? Any abstentions? Then that is carried. Okay, so that's item 12. I think that's the final item. No. Item 13 is for information only, the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board work programme to receive a report which enables the board to note the contents of its work programme for the coming year. That's not for discussion.
Chairman, if I may just say something at this point, just like to come back to the minutes if possible, and apologise because there was some duplication on minute 74 regarding the corporate plan framework, which is why Alex couldn't find her comment. If it's okay with members, I'll make amendments because the comments are not in relation to the corporate plan framework, they're from another item. So there's quite a few comments that we'll need including and amending, and bring them back to the next meeting for members to approve that set of minutes, if that's okay. The ones that we've approved today will stand as agreed unless we propose and agree that they're not, now that they're not a true record, if that's okay. Thank you.
So you're saying that essentially that the minutes that we've been presented with are not a true record?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So what are we looking to do? Are we going to vote on a new set at the next meeting?
Yeah, because there's such substantive changes, I'd need to present that to you before. So they will stand as agreed unless you want to take a vote on to essentially unapprove the minutes. So say that they're not a true record, and take a further vote on that.
Yeah, we'll do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks everybody for attending. A bit quicker than last time, but 5 to 1. And Merry Christmas to everybody, and a Happy New Year. Okay. Thanks for your attendance.